You're always there for someone. Always. You check in, even when they don't. You send them memes just to make them laugh on a bad day. You remember the little things, like their birthday, their favorite snack, or that random story they told you once 6 months ago. You show up when no one else does. In their darkest moments, you're the light they didn't even ask for but always needed. And yet, they barely notice. Your presence is taken for granted, like the sun rising or the air they breathe. It's always there, so they stop appreciating it. They never stop to wonder what life would feel like without your voice, your kindness, your silent support. But then, something changes. Not in them. In you. You stop. No more good morning texts. No more funny memes. No more late night check-ins or just thinking about you calls. You vanish, not in anger, not in revenge, but in quiet exhaustion. And suddenly, they feel it. The silence is louder than your words ever were. The space you leave behind is cold, hollow, aching. That emptiness? That's the shape of you. Now they start to say things like, I didn't realize how much you meant to me. I miss you. Why didn't I appreciate you when I had you? Please come back. But it's too late. Because now you know the truth. You were never invisible. They just chose not to see you. And now that you're gone, now that you've pulled back your energy, your time, your love, they can't ignore the impact you had. Your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. Why is that? Why do people only value someone when they're no longer around? Why does it take losing you for them to finally understand your worth? This isn't just emotional. This is psychological, behavioral, human. There's a science to this pattern. And today, we're going to unpack it, one truth at a time. These are the 9 deep psychological reasons why your silence stings louder than your love ever could. Why people often cry over your absence, when they barely blinked at your presence. Each point will reveal something powerful. About them. About you. About all of us. Because once you understand this, you'll stop overgiving. You'll stop chasing validation. And you'll finally see your worth, even if others don't. So grab a seat. Take a breath. And get ready. This is going to hit deep. Point 1. The scarcity principle. We only value what we might lose. Let's begin with one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. A silent law that governs everything from marketing to love, friendships to attention. It's called the scarcity principle. And whether you realize it or not, it's shaping the way people see you. Here's how it works. We don't value what's always available. We value what we fear might disappear. It's the same reason people will fight for a product they don't even need if the ad says, only 2 left in stock. Or, offer ends in 24 hours. Suddenly, the thing they weren't even sure they wanted becomes urgent. Their heart races. Their mind starts calculating. I can't miss out. What if I regret not getting this? This isn't logic. This is psychology. The human brain is wired for survival. And part of that wiring means we're hypersensitive to loss. We chase what we think we can lose. We ignore what we believe will always be there. Now apply that to you. When you're always the first to check in. When you reply the second they text. When you make time even when you're tired, overwhelmed, or breaking inside. You become, in their eyes, abundant. They don't mean to take you for granted. But their brain files you away as safe, predictable, always here. And once someone believes they'll never lose you, they stop making an effort to keep you. Because why chase the sun when it always rises? But then, something shifts. You stop showing up. You don't text back right away, or at all. You go silent. Not to play games but to heal, to rest, to reclaim your peace. And just like that, your absence becomes rare, mysterious, valuable. Now they're thinking, why haven't they messaged? Are they mad at me? Did I lose them? And in those questions, they begin to feel your worth. The same love that felt invisible when it was poured freely now feels precious in its absence. Not because you changed. Not because you became more lovable overnight. But because you're no longer guaranteed. That's the scarcity principle in action. And it's brutal. Because the truth is, most people don't wake up to your value until they feel the risk of living without you. They don't appreciate the text until it stops. They don't miss your voice until it goes quiet. They don't cherish your loyalty until it's no longer promised. And you? You begin to see that your consistency was never the problem. Their complacency was. So the next time someone doesn't appreciate your presence, remember this. Your worth doesn't decrease because they didn't recognize it. It simply means they've become blind to the gold that's been right in front of them. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to let them feel the weight of losing what they thought they'd always have. Point 2. Presence creates comfort. Absence creates meaning. Here's a paradox you've probably felt but never had the words for. The more present you are in someone's life, the more invisible you become. Not because you're not important. Not because you don't matter. But because you become comfortable. Familiar. Expected. This isn't your fault. It's human psychology. Our brains are wired to adapt, to normalize what we experience frequently. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation. It's the reason that new car, new phone, or even new relationship eventually loses that spark. We adjust. We settle. We stop noticing the beauty that's been right in front of us. So when you constantly show up, listening, supporting, caring, they feel warm, safe, grounded. But over time, they stop pausing to appreciate it. They stop saying thank you. They stop feeling the gravity of your presence. Why? Because comfort numbs awareness. It's not until that comfort is removed, until the texts stop, the late night calls vanish, and the emotional safety net disappears, that the brain wakes up. Suddenly, there's silence. Space. A void. And in that silence, something powerful happens. The mind begins to rewind. It starts playing flashbacks. Quiet moments it once overlooked now return with emotional weight. The time you stayed up all night when they were hurting. The random texts that made them smile on a hard day. The quiet ways you showed love without ever needing recognition. This process is called retrospective emotional realization. It doesn't happen while you're giving. It happens only when the giving stops. They start asking themselves, what did they bring into my life? Why do I feel this emptiness now? Was I too caught up in myself to see what they gave me? They begin to realize, you weren't just part of their life. You were part of their peace, their confidence, their stability. And now, in your absence, everything feels a little colder, a little shakier, a little less alive. Here's the hardest truth. You were healing them while they were barely noticing. You were their safe place while they were out exploring storms. And now that you've walked away, they feel your absence like a missing heartbeat. They start to miss what they thought would never leave. They start to search for what once came freely. But here's the kicker. You didn't disappear to hurt them. You disappeared to find yourself again. To stop bleeding for people who didn't even realize you were wounded. To stop giving oxygen to people who never noticed you were running out of breath. And now, in your stillness, they feel the magnitude of what you used to bring. Not in words, but in the quiet pain of what's no longer there. Point 3. You leave behind an emotional blueprint. Let's talk about something most people never realize until it's too late. Emotional imprinting. Every smile you shared, every late night conversation, every little ritual you created, even the silly ones. Like the way you always sent a good morning text or teased them over their weird coffee order. It all left a mark. Not on paper, not in photos, but in the most sacred place of all. Their emotional memory. You see, our brains aren't just storage units for facts. They're emotional recording devices. They capture how someone made us feel, even if we don't realize it in the moment. Your laugh, filed away under comfort. Your scent, tagged with safety. The way you listened without judgment, labeled as home. And over time, without even trying, you became a habit in their nervous system. A pattern their heart grew used to. An anchor in their chaotic world. You didn't just exist in their life. You lived in it, like background music playing on repeat. But here's the twist. When you disappear, it's not just that they notice the silence. It's that their entire emotional rhythm goes off beat. You weren't just someone in their life. You shaped their life. You were a structure they leaned on emotionally, even if they never admitted it. And now, their system crashes. Because the brain doesn't adjust to emotional loss the same way it adjusts to logical change. It doesn't just delete your folder and move on. No. It tries to run the same emotional programs. But you're no longer there to respond. They'll wake up and instinctively reach for their phone to text you, only to remember you're not there. They'll pass by a coffee shop and hear a song you loved. And suddenly, they're flooded with a memory they didn't know was still alive inside them. That's the thing about emotional blueprints. They don't fade with time. They echo. They replay in quiet moments. In dreams. In triggers. In places you once existed together. And even if they pushed you away, even if they didn't recognize your worth in the moment, their subconscious stored you. You didn't just fill space. You created emotional architecture. And when you walked away, it wasn't just a door closing. It was a part of their inner world collapsing. So when they say, "I miss you," what they're really saying is, "I don't know how to function without the piece of myself that you became." You see, that's the power of presence. You didn't just love them. You rewired them. And no one forgets the person who changed their emotional landscape, even if they try. Point 4. The mind fears incompleteness. And you became an unfinished chapter. There's something haunting about stories that don't end. Not the ones that end in heartbreak. Not even the ones that end in tears. But the ones that don't end at all. They just stop. No closure. No final conversation. No explanation. Just a sudden deafening silence, where there used to be laughter, chaos, or comfort. And here's where psychology steps in with a quiet, devastating truth. The mind doesn't know how to let go of the unfinished. This is called the Zygarnik effect, a psychological phenomenon discovered by Russian psychologist Bluma Zygarnik. She found that our brains naturally fixate on incomplete tasks, unresolved stories, unanswered questions. Your sudden absence? That wasn't just a change in routine. It was an emotional cliffhanger. A page torn out of their story before the ending could be written. And the brain, oh, how it hates that. It goes into overdrive. Replaying conversations. Rewriting memories. Questioning every detail. It becomes obsessive. Was it something I said? Did they ever care? Why didn't they fight for me? Why did they leave without a goodbye? That loop becomes emotional torment. A thought cycle that plays on repeat. Day after day, night after night. Because there was no period to the sentence. Just a comma that turned into a ghost. You became an unfinished chapter in their story. And the thing about unfinished chapters is, they never truly close. They echo. They linger. They haunt. Because silence isn't just empty. It's loud in the places that crave closure. And your silence? It didn't just confuse them. It wounded them in a way that words never could. Sometimes, silence screams the loudest truth. You lost someone who would have stayed if you had just seen them. But now, your absence has become a puzzle they can't solve. A riddle their heart can't answer. A mystery their mind can't forget. And that's the part they never expected. That you would become the one story they couldn't finish. The one person they'd replay 1,000 times. Not to remember but to understand. That's the psychological power of an ending that never came. It keeps them stuck in a memory loop, trying to write a final chapter. But the pen is no longer in their hands. It's gone. Just like you. Point 5. The contrast effect. Pain makes you see what was good. Let's talk about a cruel trick the mind plays on all of us. We rarely see the value of peace. Until chaos storms in. When you were there. Showing up. Checking in, offering your time, your patience, your calm love. You were the stillness in their storm. But they didn't see it that way. Because peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply is. And that's the tragedy of it. You gave warmth without asking for a thank you. You gave consistency without needing applause. You made the hard days softer and the long nights feel a little less lonely. But the human brain? It adjusts. And when something becomes too constant, too reliable, too good, it fades into the background. Not because it lost value, but because it was never painful enough to trigger awareness. Until you're gone. And then the contrast effect hits. It's a psychological principle that explains how we evaluate things not in isolation, but in comparison. You don't realize how warm a room is until you step out into the cold. You don't realize how soft a voice was, until all you hear is silence. You don't recognize emotional safety, until you feel emotional chaos. Your absence becomes the contrast, the bitterness, the void. And in that void, they suddenly feel what they couldn't see before. They start comparing. They compare your thoughtful texts to the silence they now scroll through. They compare your emotional availability to the emotional distance they now face. They compare the peace you brought to the anxiety that settled in. It hurts, because now they remember your presence in a way they never truly appreciated while it was there. You were the gentle, the stable, the anchor. And now you're gone. And everything else feels like driftwood in a storm. They didn't know they were breathing clean air, until the room filled with smoke. They didn't know they had gold in their hands, until it slipped through their fingers. That's the irony of emotional memory. It doesn't just recall what happened. It amplifies it once it's gone. Now, every peaceful moment with you plays back in high definition. Every laugh, every comfort, every act of quiet loyalty they once took for granted. You see, absence has a way of sharpening the contrast, of making what was once soft and subtle feel vivid and undeniable. And in that contrast, they don't just miss you. They ache for the peace you were, the simplicity you offered, the love they didn't know how to appreciate, until pain made the difference obvious. Because now, you're the benchmark for everything they compare others to. And no one else feels quite like home. Point 6. They believed you'd never leave until you did. This is the one that cuts the deepest. Not because of what you did, but because of what they assumed you'd never do. You see, when someone shows up for you, again and again and again, the mind begins to build a dangerous illusion. They'll always be there. You become predictable, safe, a constant. They take your forgiveness for granted. Your patience becomes expected. Your emotional labor? Unnoticed, because it always arrives. They don't realize they're building a castle on borrowed time. And each time you showed up when they didn't deserve it, each time you gave when they gave nothing in return, each time you stayed silent when you could have spoken your pain, you were quietly tightening a rope. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Even the most loyal soul has a limit. Even unconditional love needs fuel. Even the strongest rope frays. And when you finally walked away, when the rope snapped, it didn't just leave a hole in their life. It shattered the illusion. That illusion is what psychologists call a perceived emotional safety net. It's the false belief that no matter how badly they treat you, you'll always catch them. You'll always care. You'll always stay. And when that net disappears, they don't just feel alone. They feel exposed. It triggers a psychological response known as a narcissistic injury, a deep wound to the ego, even in people who aren't classic narcissists. Because now, they're not just facing your absence. They're facing the reality that they were never in control of you. That you were not a guarantee. That your love was a choice, not a rule. Suddenly, they start replaying the moments when you were too kind, too forgiving, too available. They remember all the times they thought, "I'll reply later. They'll understand." They always do. But now there's no reply. No understanding. No always. And here's the cruel irony. They didn't believe you'd leave, because you gave them no reason to. You were the rock, the safety, the quiet presence in the background who always came through. And that's why your absence doesn't feel like silence. It feels like betrayal. Not because you hurt them, but because their ego never considered you had the power to walk away. Now they're left with a haunting realization. They didn't just lose someone who cared. They lost someone who chose them again and again. Until one day, they didn't. And nothing haunts the mind like the moment it realizes, "I thought they'd never leave. But they did." Point 7. Memory begins to rewrite the truth. Here's one of the strangest tricks the human brain plays. It edits the past. Not like a photo filter where everything gets clearer, but more like a fog rolling in, softening the sharp edges and blurring the truth just enough to make it beautiful. This is a psychological phenomenon known as rosy retrospection, where the mind looks back on the past not as it was, but as it wants it to have been. It forgets the chaos, the broken promises, the half-hearted replies, the silent treatments. The constant emotional withdrawal they handed you while you were handing them everything. The missed birthdays? The emotional neglect? The times you cried and they didn't even notice? Faded. Like an old painting left in the sun too long. The colors of the truth begin to fade. And what's left behind is romanticized. You're no longer the person they ignored or dismissed. Now, you're the one who understood them when no one else did. The one who showed up when they didn't even know they needed saving. The one who listened to their silence and still heard the pain. And that's where the irony kicks in. You were taken for granted in reality, but adored in memory. They start to remember you not as you were, but as they wish you had been. Because it hurts less than admitting the truth. That they had something rare. Something sacred. And they let it slip away. So now, they replay the moments that never really mattered to them at the time. The way you smiled when they were down. The messages you sent at 2 a.m. just to check in. The comfort in your voice. The way you stayed, even when they didn't deserve it. And with every memory, the guilt grows. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and creeping, like a shadow that never leaves the room. And suddenly, you're missed more than you ever were loved. That's the power of absence. It turns indifference into longing, neglect into nostalgia, and regret into something they carry in silence. Because how do you mourn someone that you didn't appreciate until they were already gone? Sometimes, the mind clings to memories harder than it ever did to the actual person. Because in memory, you're perfect. In memory, you're the one that got away. In memory, you're the soft echo in the empty halls of their heart. And sometimes, memory hurts more than reality ever could. Because reality could have changed. But memory? Memory is eternal. Point 8. The ego cannot process rejection from someone they took lightly. Here's the harshest, deepest truth of all. One that often goes unspoken but lingers in the shadows of every broken connection. Your absence doesn't just leave behind sadness. It leaves behind a raw, gnawing humiliation. Because in the quiet aftermath of losing you, they face an undeniable, painful fact. They misjudged you. They assumed without question that you were always going to be there. A constant fixture in their life. Someone who cared too much, loved too deeply, and would never walk away. But now, you're gone. And with your absence comes a gut-wrenching confrontation with their own arrogance and blindness. They lost someone who was truly rare. Someone whose loyalty was not cheap or guaranteed. Someone who chose to stay, to give, to love, until the very end. This isn't just a loss. It's a psychological injury to their ego. Their pride takes a hit deeper than any argument or disappointment could cause. Because it's not just, you're gone. It's, I didn't deserve you. And now I know it. That realization is like a heavy stone sinking deep inside their chest. Heavier than guilt, more suffocating than regret. It flips the entire story in their mind. They aren't just mourning your absence anymore. They're wrestling with their own failure. They thought you were easy to replace. They thought you were just another person in the crowd. But the truth burns hotter. You were one of a kind. A treasure hidden in plain sight. And the crushing weight of having taken you lightly breaks something inside them. Their ego can't handle being rejected by someone they thought they controlled or could rely on unconditionally. It triggers a psychological shock. A sudden awareness of powerlessness. Because suddenly, they realize. You didn't just leave. You chose to leave. And losing you isn't just about loneliness or missing companionship. It's about losing control over someone they thought was theirs to keep. This shakes the very foundation of their identity. And now, when they beg for you to come back, it's not just love driving their words. It's a desperate attempt to reclaim what shattered their sense of power and self-worth. They're not just asking for you, they're begging to feel in control again. And that's why your absence stings more than any argument ever could. Because it's not just an emotional void. It's a wound to their pride, their ego, their sense of security. And that wound is far harder to heal than a broken heart. Point 9. Absence doesn't just take you away, it shakes their identity. Here's the final, most profound piece of the puzzle. You didn't simply exist in their life like a passing shadow or a temporary guest. You became part of who they are. They laughed differently with you. A laugh colored by shared secrets, inside jokes, and moments only the two of you understood. They saw themselves differently because of you. Reflected in your kindness, acceptance, and unwavering presence, they found a version of themselves they wanted to believe in. They depended on the version of themselves that you helped shape. The confident self, the loved self, the hopeful self. But now, with your absence, that version of them feels fractured, incomplete, like a puzzle missing its most important piece. This deep psychological phenomenon is called relational identity loss. It happens when someone we were emotionally attached to leaves. When the person who was the mirror for our identity disappears, the reflection shatters. And without that reflection, they struggle to remember who they truly are. So your absence? It doesn't just feel like they lost a person. It feels like they lost a piece of themselves. It shakes the foundation of their identity. It creates a void where confidence once lived. They may try to fill it with distractions or new relationships, but deep down, they feel hollow. Because the mirror that helped them see their best self is gone. They say people don't truly change until it hurts. Until something breaks. Until someone walks away. And when that happens, that's when the mind does its most painful work. It replays the love it didn't appreciate. It rebuilds the memories it once took for granted. It regrets the presence it only understood through absence. So if you've ever wondered why your silence echoes louder than your words, why your absence cuts deeper than any argument ever could, it's because your absence became a mirror. And now, all they see reflected back is what they lost. If this message hit you in the heart, if it stirred something you felt but couldn't explain, I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing down, drop a comment below. Have you ever walked away, only for someone to realize what you meant when you were gone? Or maybe you were the one who realized too late what someone else meant to you. Let's be real and raw with each other. Because your stories don't just heal you, they help others heal too. Brain, and if you're ready for more deep dives into psychology, emotional intelligence, and those raw truths no one talks about, make sure to hit subscribe. Here on this channel, we're not afraid to go deep. We're here to understand, to feel, and to grow. Not just to scroll.